Hey, friends, welcome back to the Music Retail Podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode. Today, I've got John Tarpley from Tarpley Music, headquartered in Amarillo, Texas. And we're going to talk about a bunch of really fascinating conversations today. First of all, we're going to talk about how the kind of the history and founding of Tarpley, which is a really unique founding story going all the way back to really honestly kind of the early official founding, I think, was in the 1920s, but it sort of got started a little bit before that in a way, which we'll get into. And then we're going to talk about like the challenges of having multiple locations. Tarpley Music has 9 actual total locations, some of which are retail, other which are warehouse and other divisions. We'll kind of get into that. We'll get into some of the challenges of having multiple locations, the reasons for having multiple locations, might even reveal the reasons not to have multiple locations. I really admire like a lot of their marketing efforts and how they've handled e-commerce, and they're also using the culture by design. So we're going to really get into kind of all these topics. It's going to be really, really fascinating. So John, thank you so much for carving out time here as we wrap up July in 2024 to have this conversation.
Well, thank you, Duncan. I appreciate it. It's really an honor to be on. You do a great job with this podcast. So
thank
you for the invite.
Yeah, thanks. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get inspired and get to talk to other folks and see how we're all doing this stuff. So let's start with first things first. Like, let's get into the history of Tarpley Music. So kind of give me the Cliff Notes version of how this began, because you guys have a unique background, I think, especially for the time period of which it was started.
I would agree, and it would take the whole podcast to go through our whole history. So I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. But it was started by my great-grandmother. So she was a piano teacher, if anyone's familiar with geography, but the Panhandle of Texas, pretty sparsely populated part of the world. She started teaching piano when she was a kid with her family. She ended up marrying a gentleman named Eddie Tarpley. They were farmers, and they had a farm. If people are familiar with Route 66, they were in a town in it called Shamrock, which is right on Route 66, right after the Oklahoma-Texas border. She was doing pretty well. Doing pretty well with her lessons, but she decided to start bringing in pianos. She had a local banker there that met up with her, and they started bringing them into a local department store and started selling pianos. So, here's a female in the 20s at this time.
Yeah.
Running a business, which is just spectacular. There is a town about an hour away called Pampa, Texas. It was an oil boom town. It was out here. It was a big town. It's a small town, but in this part of the world, it was a big town. It was hustle, bustle. She just got a wild hair and said, you know what? I want to go sell pianos. And so she left her husband on the farm back in Shamrock. She moved to Pampa. Really not sure how she financed it. I don't know how that happened. But she rented a building downtown. It's the typical old shotgun type style building, 20 feet wide by 80 feet deep, I think is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And started getting pianos in by the trainloads. And, of course, in those days, pianos were the entertainment. I mean, it was kind of like the TV set, the radio. So most everybody wanted one. And so she set up shop and started selling. And apparently she was quite a lot of charisma, big personality, very strong, a small person in stature, like short, but
right,
big in personality. And kind of one of her little things, which she would get prospects, and then she'd get a train load of pianos in, and she'd say, I don't have enough room in my showroom. Would you mind if I would store one at your house until we have some space in the store? And then we'll come pick it up at that point, bring it back. And I don't think she had to pick very many pianos.
Oh, that's so smart. That's so smart.
So she got after it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a very short version of how she got it. So we know for sure in 1927, she had the business operating in Pampa. She was doing business probably in the late teens, as best as we can tell.
Yeah.
Some of this history gets lost over time. We know a lot of it, but that's the best we can tell that she was. Her son got involved in the 30s. His name is Lewis. He was a pilot, ended up training Navy pilots for World War II in the 40s. Kind of a neat part of what he did in his life. But he was in the business. She unfortunately passed actually after a piano delivery, of all things, coming back to the store. He took over at that point, and so the second generation was going, still that one store in that small town. They had 2 sons that got involved in the business. One was my dad, Glenn. went by Buzz, and then his brother Bill, the older brother was Bill, and they got involved in the '50s. They served in the Air Force and went to school, and then came back to Pampa and started running the music business. So you kind of hear a lot about the third generation killing businesses, or that's kind of where things really fall. I don't know how true that is, really. I mean, I think a lot of people sell their businesses before they get to the third generation. But these guys they solidified it. They were just great business people, just understood how to operate. They knew the financials, understood, and they're both great salespeople, which is hard to find sometimes, someone that can really sell and also understand numbers.
Yep.
And they both could do it. And so they really solidified the company. So, I mean, again, I don't know how deep you want to go, but
this is great.
Yeah, they in the '60s, late '60s, they had an opportunity to. Well, actually, before in the mid '60s, they opened a store in a little town called Perryton, Texas. So they had 2 stores operating. In the late '60s, they moved into Amarillo, and so my uncle Bill moved to Amarillo. My dad stayed in Pampa, and they did more business, I think, in Amarillo in about a week than they did in 2 months in Perryton. So they decided they'd shut the Perryton store down, and they operated the Pampa and the Amarillo store for. So those two ran those 2 stores for a long time. In the '80s, my cousin, who's my business partner, he and I have been in it together for a long time. Bill's son, he got involved in the mid '80s. We had an opportunity to purchase a store in Lubbock, Texas, and so he was right out of college, and they threw him to the wolves down there. And we bought that store. I was at college at that time in Lubbock at Tech, and when I graduated in '89, I joined the company. And so when Dave and I got really going, we just opened our 3rd store. So
gotcha.
And so then in '91, we opened a 4th store in a town called Clovis, New Mexico. That's where Buddy Holly recorded, and Roy Orbison, just called the Norman Petty Studios, was out there. So it's right on the other side of the Texas Panhandle, right over the border in New Mexico.
Gotcha.
And, so that was the first time we ever had a store without a Tarpley in it. That was a big deal. That was in 1991, and it worked well. We did great. So we had 4 stores operating.
This is wild to me that your cousin graduates from college and the family's like, here, just buy this store. And like just kind of out of the blue, I've got a kid who is old enough to be graduating from college. He ended up not graduating, but who works in the store, doing a great job. But I couldn't imagine just telling him, all right, Caleb, like you're going to buy this location. And like, that just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. He learned a lot in a hurry.
I bet.
He's really good. He's really smart. They helped. But it was, again, distance back then was a lot more than it is now. It was 120 miles from Amarillo to Lubbock. So he was on an island down there.
Yeah.
It was a store. They approached us. They came to us actually through a vendor, Peavy, of all people, brought them to us that they were looking to sell, and it just kind of coordinated with him where he was in his life, and he kind of said, "Well, I'll do it."
Right.
And so he did.
That's wild. So what's the range of your stores from like kind of the furthest store from one geographical point to the furthest store from the other geographical point? How far apart are we talking here?
450 miles probably.
Gotcha. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. And then what's your distance on like from the furthest point from your main location in Amarillo to the furthest store away? How long is that time-wise?
It's a 6.5 hour drive.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges with being that far away? Because we have at Ernie Williamson, we have multiple locations, a similar number of locations. We have 7, and kind of like you, 6 of ours are retail. 1 is warehouse offices, so on and so forth.
Right.
And I kind of have this general rule of thumb of like, I just want to be able to get to a store and back in the same day. Like that's kind of my plan. Or like, I don't know that I want to go any further that I can't go there and come back and be at home that night, or not just me, but whoever works for me, that they couldn't, be home that evening if they needed to. Not to say we don't sometimes do overnights. So that limits us to, kind of 4-5 hours in terms of distance at this point. So tell me how you're handling the 6.5 hour. That's significant.
It is. And, I guess that's all I've ever known is multiple stores. That's all I've ever known is distance between the stores. Yeah, our one we opened in San Angelo was it's a little over a 4 hour drive, and I've made that down back many times. As I get older, I tend to stay, but if I know I can get home, I'll get home.
Right.
But especially these days with the communication available that we have and the way we can connect and see each other, talk to each other, do a Zoom call or Teams or whatever happens to be, it's just really not an issue. I mean, if something happens, if it's 10 miles away or 400 miles away, you still have the same problem. You got to go. You got to go do it. But we just have an incredible team. I mean, you just got to trust your people. You got to rely on them to make their decisions and go with it. Most all our managers have, well, pretty much all of them, 10, 15, 20 years experience, and with us mostly. With our manager in Lubbock's been here longer than I have, so
wow.
When we bought that store, he was there and he's still with us.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just, having the systems, not micromanaging as best you can, let them roll. I don't, I can't make them all the time. So I do try to make a point to get out and be sure they don't need me that much. I mean, they know what they're doing, but I like to see everybody and talk to them and let them know I'm, that we're here and that we're supporting them. But, the distance thing, it just really hasn't been a problem. Yeah. So I do spend the night if I go into Dallas, I'll spend the night.
Yeah. So for inventory, do you guys have inventory shipped directly to each of those stores, or is it being shipped to your warehouse and the warehouse is distributing?
It's a little bit of a combination. If it's large, big speaker cabinets, we're shipping direct the most we can. If it's a keyboard, large, like a Clavinova or something like that. Pretty much everything else we try to run through our warehousing system. So, certainly all accessories, and, like master order stuff all comes in to the warehouse. And then we distribute out from there. We have definitely outgrown our warehouse significantly. That's kind of our next big project is, we've got to get space. We're out of space, but we're working it all the time. We have things in place to try to keep it working. And there is some, that's where with multiple stores, you got to take advantage of that inventory aspect, and that you don't have to have as much in every location, and you got to try to use that to your advantage. So we found centralizing has been the best thing that we've done. Actually, Dave and I, we were in two different stores back in the mid 90s, about 180 miles apart. And we were trying to manage back then. Again, we didn't have the communication we have now, and we were trying to manage this thing. And it was just hard. And we just kind of made a decision, we got to be in the same place. We just have to. And we left the stores we were running, and there was no Tarpleys in any of the stores.
Right.
1995. It was the best move we've made, though. I mean, we had to make that move, or we would never have gotten any more than we would have been stuck where we were, which is fine if that's what we wanted. But we kind of kept moving forward.
I totally know how you feel. When we had started our expansion, and added the store in St. Louis and the one in Kansas City, those were done nearly back to back on accident. I wouldn't really recommend doing it that way normally, but that happened way back in 2012 and 13. And at that time, my office and everything was in the store in Springfield, which was our kind of headquarters. And it became, I remember one day I was doing something on the floor in the store, and it just dawned on me that I hadn't thought of the other locations at all in a couple of days, like just not even aware of their existence really. And right. I was so focused on just what we were doing in Springfield that I almost, just completely forgot the existence of these other stores. And I immediately knew, like, this is a problem. Like, and it's so hard to not be focused on the store in Springfield when I'm in there every single day. And even if I don't have responsibilities on the floor, I'm walking through the floor, as I come in the mornings and as I leave for lunch, and I'm going out when there's a question or they need something or I need something, and I'm going out when I leave. So it's just making me so centered with that. And then eventually we kind of needed to expand and needed some additional room. And we took that opportunity at that point, like, this would be a good time to get a better offsite location, move some of our accounting and other processes offsite, and really start to think about the company as a whole and not as a Springfield location with other subsidiary locations, which could work if those subsidiaries were, 20 minutes this way and 30 minutes that way. But when they're 4 hours that way, 3.5 hours, they're not subsidiaries at that
They're
point.
not.
They got to be their own
store.
independent thing. And so I totally understand those challenges. So with your locations being so far apart, those locations then are likely, are they sufficient music stores, stocked to serve their local community, or are they satellites of the mothership?
They're actually, that word branch stores or satellites, it's a pet peeve for mine. I think that's a bad way to address your multiple store locations, because it's just kind of derogatory. I think if they had that perception in their store that they're a branch store, okay, so we're secondary. And all our stores are actually, our, Amarillo's where our oldest store is, but it's not the largest store. There's there's other stores that are actually larger, have more inventory, have more employees. So we really, what's one of my keys with it, you got to share your love between all your stores, And so when you get stuck in one, they're going to come to you in that store, and you lose vision of that. So all these stores are on their own. I mean, if you probably don't need to open a store if it can't be self-sufficient, if it was just a single store in that market, and it should be stocked that way. I mean, they're all a full blown store other than the admin. We try to take care of all the admin and those type of things, and take that away and just stay focused on sales and customer experience type things.
I think I've shared the story before, but when I started getting into the industry, when I came to Springfield Music, which then became Ernie Williamson Music. But when I came here and was reading trade magazines, and I'd read about all these retailers that had multiple store locations, I just assumed everybody was doing it the way, like what you're doing it, the way that we do it, where, if you have 3 locations, you basically would have 3 more or less equal locations, roughly the same size, roughly the same inventory. And it wasn't until I actually started traveling around and visiting some of these stores that I realized that there was a different model to do it, which I think, I understand what you're saying about the branch model. I think that can be successful, and I think that if truly a store is a branch store, you should call it that. It's if your main store is 20,000 square feet and carries 20,000 SKUs and everything else, and then there's a small store with 1,500 square feet, carries 30 guitars and everything else, it's going to be a different thing.
Sure.
But and in some of those models, I get why they exist, because they exist primarily like they're teaching lessons, they're capturing rentals, they're kind of more of like in that school service model of like, we just do this, but if you need more than that, then oftentimes in that model, that store is only 20 or 30 minutes away from like the mothership. So I could see that it's like a convenience store at that point. Like it kind of makes sense. But when our strategy was more, rather than opening a music store 20 minutes away from us, where we felt like it might compete with us, we felt like, well, let's go further away into an entire, just a different shopping metro area, and operate full line stores, much like what you do. So the logistics of that, though, are challenging, right? I mean, and that was kind of one of the first things that we noticed as our first store was an hour away from Springfield. And then we had to develop kind of some better processes and procedures and stuff, but not that bad, because an hour is not that long to drive to get there.
Right.
But when we opened 2 more stores that were 3 hours away from Springfield, it revealed all of the weaknesses and lack of infrastructure and lack of planning and systems that we had through having that. And probably chief of which was culture, which I want to get to here in a second. But you've always grown up in this kind of multi-store location. What have been some of the challenges that you've seen that your company has addressed, or maybe even that your parents addressed as they were kind of building this model of multiple locations? What are some of the challenges that they had to deal with?
Yeah, I think initially it was kind of, when my dad and uncle were running those 2 stores, it was kind of like two completely autonomous locations. They shared a few things, but they kind of did their own thing. It was under the same umbrella, so they didn't really have the challenges that you're talking about. It's probably really when David and I really got it going and got to that 4th location, and then no Tarpley was in the stores. And the first thing we did was centralize the company. That was the first step that we understood that had to be a step for us to take. So communication was better. So, we could limit how many admin people we needed, because there's a lot of duplication there that just wasn't necessary. So those are the couple of things right off the top. But obviously moving inventory is a challenge in a timely fashion. I don't know if I have a great answer on that, other than we just, we ship a lot of stuff. We also have trucks that move, and we always try to always utilize any kind of vehicle that's moving if we need to move inventory. I don't care what it's for or what you're doing.
Yeah.
My truck, I never go to any store without, I have a Suburban, and it's filled to the gills anytime I go to any location. They're always shocked how much stuff I can get in there. So,
right.
But if I'm coming this way, we're going to make it, we're going to make the inventory move too. So, communication is always a challenge, obviously. And one thing, we have a weekly management call every Monday morning with all our entire team that's in the management level, all the divisions. And that's been really helpful too, because it creates a little more of a team environment too, where everyone's kind of sharing and helping each other out. It's so key for the other stores, everyone to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that we're the same thing here. If it works great in Burleson, then it's great for Clovis and it's great for Lubbock. And, so we've really worked hard on that. And I think them having some relationships with each other helps a lot. Of course, now things, I remember in the old days we had to, we were trying to connect. We were probably one of the early stores that connected everything online, real time, live. I can't even remember the name of those processors those we were using, but I mean, they're so antiquated now for what the technology is. But I'd go back and have to flip switches, and it was crazy, but it was great, and it was going down the phone lines, and it was really, really slow.
Right.
But you could see everybody's inventory. You could see all the accounts, and that was just mind blowing back in, I'm aging myself, but back in the day. And now with the technology that we have, God, it solves so many problems.
Yeah.
It's just there. Everything's at your fingertips. And so we're trying to always improve how we use our technology. We've still got a long ways to go, but it's something we're trying to continue to grow with us, because that can solve a lot of those issues, those troubles.
This might be a tough thing for you to answer, since you already own multiple stores. But in 2024 and going forward, does having multiple locations make sense? Because I think when that started, in the 60s and the 90s and beyond, of course it made sense. If you wanted to sell more product in Lubbock, or you wanted to sell more product in Clovis or whatever, the best way to do it was, well, let's just open a store down there. And, that's just kind of makes sense. But in today's world, like for moving product, sometimes that may not be the most efficient way to do it. How do you feel like the role of your stores has changed with just the wide advancement of e-commerce? And you have any prognosis for the future?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've opened 3 stores in the last 10 years. I think it goes back to one of my points earlier, is that each is very much a distinct market that we're in. And, there's always a place for the retail world. I mean, even after COVID, we saw how people came back into the stores, even though it did accelerate e-commerce. And I'm not foolish enough to know that, we've got to be a player in that and be ready for that. But, our retail traffic's still good. It's still solid. You got to have a place that people want to come to. It needs to be well kept, look good, nice inventory. We don't go crazy. We try to be very intelligent with our inventory. But if it's a unique market, I think it can sustain a good, solid retail store without any issues. It's interesting because some of the, even Uber's starting to own their own fleets now, and you're starting to see some of the, Amazon putting in their own stores and places. So they're actually coming to the retail world,
right,
which is an interesting turn for them. So there is value there, and just realistically, there's fewer and fewer of us, unfortunately. I mean, I know when my dad and uncle moved into Amarillo, and Amarillo's 250,000 now, but it was probably not even 100,000 people back then. There were 13 music stores, 13.
Yep.
And which is just hard to, now there's us and 2 national chain stores, right? So, so there's a place for an independent that runs their business well, I think. So
I think that's the challenge, though. You've got to run your business well, or it's just so hard to keep that going today. I think it was easier. It's never been easy, but it was easier back in the day. You could be less sophisticated, less knowledgeable, and just buy stuff at wholesale, sell it at retail,
Right.
and like that
Because you're
was
the only place to go, right? I
yeah, that
mean,
was
yeah.
all the sophistication needed. But I think in today's world, it's far more challenging. How much has been your involvement? How much of a role has your involvement in the school music market been a deciding factor in opening locations? And by that, I mean like, you know, if as you look to go into a new market, is the school music rental market a key thing of like, yep, that makes sense for us to be there, or would you do it in spite of that, just to retail products?
The school music services is the one and only reason we will do that.
Yeah,
We love normal retail. We love combo, but I would not, if I didn't have the school services, we wouldn't make that risk.
yeah,
And in the markets we've gone, these last three stores, we'd already had ed reps out in that area from another store. You know, seeing what the area is like, if it was an opportunity for us, and so we were already scouting it, seeing if it made sense. So we were already familiar with the market. They were familiar with us. But yeah, if it wasn't for the school business, we wouldn't take that chance.
yeah. I think I feel the same way. That's our indicator as well. I mean, we even have one location that is honestly more of a service center. It has a retail store, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote, but it's a school service business. It's, that's really what it is, and that's why we were interested in it. Most of our other locations do a significant amount of retail, but I often feel like with our retail efforts that at this point we do retail so that we can teach lessons and do rentals. Like, it's like the retail will cover the expenses and like provide the building and the staff and everything else so that we can rent instruments and teach lessons,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's where we're really going to make the money. And retail still brings in the most dollars, but it has a lot of costs associated with it. So,
Yeah, and it's hard. It's in any retail, it's hard these days. But
yeah.
our market's pretty small, so it's
Yeah.
tough.
The music products market, you mean? Like our
Yes.
industry is
Yeah,
small.
industry
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. We'd kind of touched on this before, but I know for me, one of the biggest challenges that I experienced as we had multiple locations was getting the culture in our main location shared amongst the other locations. And part of my challenges were the culture that we had originally at the main location in Springfield was only somewhat intentional. It was mostly just a culture that kind of radiated from me and a couple of other people, and the people that sort of gravitated to like, I like what you're doing, I want to be a part of that. And it wasn't a real conscious plan other than like, well, I want to try to treat people right, and I want to try to have a good time doing what we're doing, and I want to be good at what we do. That was about as probably articulate as, as my culture had been.
Right.
But and it's just kind of emanated from my presence and just being involved and hands and everything and all that kind of stuff. And then I came to learn as we added further locations, and that I just could not be in these locations that much, that I just could not get that culture and presence to just immediately impart over just by being there some or trying to share it. And so that led to us for a couple of different times sort of trying to retool and revamp to try to find a way to do that. Our latest effort has been here in 2024. We've been doing the Culture by Design program, which we've been really happy with. And I feel like that rollout has gone well for us and has been useful, even though we're still only 7 months into it. You, however, have done this now for several years of doing Culture by Design. So can you tell me a little bit about that process, what it is, why you got into it, and what have been the benefits for you?
Sure. I got the idea from our good friends, Dave Waters and Amro. Those guys are usually pretty smart at what they do, and they were just getting started in it when they talked to us about it. And so I read the book, and I like reading all those kind of books. A lot of them I'm a little skeptical. I kind of push back. That's just kind of the way I am. Or anything that says do these 10 steps and you'll run a great business, I go, okay. I mean, I'll glean what I want out of it. But when I read that book, I thought, duh. When I read it, it's like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's just so logical, so common sense. It just resonated with me very strongly. And I gave it to our team to read, our leadership team, and Dave and the other owners in the company, and they're like, "Yeah, that makes a lot of sense," And we have a great culture. We wouldn't make it this long if we didn't have a great culture. But just like you say, when you start, used to, I knew everybody in the company easily by name, and their families. I don't have that like I used to. So it's a little frustrating, but not having how we expect this to operate is a challenge for those multiple locations. So, as you mentioned, intentional culture, and that's something he talks about a lot in that book, is that you're going to have a culture regardless. I mean, you're going to have a culture no matter what. And so you
Mm-hmm.
could be the biggest personality. You can just let it happen however it happens, or you can be intentional. So that just truly resonated with us, and how, one of the biggest things you hear employees, if they have an issue with a company they work with, is communication, expectations, right? And this is a clear way to show that, And so, and I also like that it was behavior, not some just, concept. It's actual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we during COVID is when we put it to work. Our leadership team. That's kind of what we did for almost a year. We met a couple of times, but we would work on it. We ended up with 22. He calls them the book. He calls them fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
We call them the Tarpley essentials. And so we came up with 22 behaviors of our expectations, how this company should operate. And did we always do that? Of course not. We're human. We fall short. But it's very clear how we want to be and how we should be, and what we
Mm-hmm.
should challenge ourselves for. And so when we first rolled it out, David and I split the stores, and we just went to each store, had the whole team together before it opened, and we just went through the whole thing and the reasons behind it and why we did it. It's an easy concept. And it makes sense. The hard part is making it work. Is the application, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's always the issue.
Right.
There's no secrets here. It's just, can you follow through with it?
Right.
And so we followed through. We sat there and spent time in person with everybody in the company. Took any questions. And it's going. We knew they wouldn't just go, "Oh yeah, this is great." So we did that, and then we would take turns and alternated an essential. And he and I have an email go out once a week. Here's the essential of the week with our take on it, expand on it, and we did that every week. And so then after we did it, we started spreading out throughout the rest of the team. Managers would do it. We're to the point now, we're 3-4 years into it. I've got ed reps doing it. I've got repair techs, sales team on the floor. And I tell you, it's fantastic because they come up with great visions and perspectives of the fundamental that we have, and they expand on it maybe in a whole different way you hadn't thought about it before. And so we just keep putting it out there. And of course, we try to talk about it anytime we meet. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't, but we do mostly. I do have to say our general manager, he uses it every day. I mean, I don't know how many times he's told me, he said, I have yet to come across a situation that I couldn't apply at least one, if not 3 or 4 of our essentials, and say, you know what, it's right here. This is the path that we should have taken. It tells you. So I'm a believer. I mean, it sold me. I'm seeing our team use it now. I mean, consciously. I mean, subconsciously probably, but it's coming. We just keep it. We just, what's he say in the book? Make it a ritual, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like you brush your teeth,
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
So we're at that point of trying to get that over that hill. And I think we're close, but we're going to keep. We're not going to pull off on it at all. I mean, I think it's vital for. It's really pretty important for any company, but if you have multiple locations, you're spread, or even you have a whole lot of employees in one place, you whatever culture method you use, you need to be very clear about it, I think.
Yeah. We're using the same program, and the Cliff Notes version, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is as you've talked about, rather than having like a bunch of platitudes or a bunch of ideals that you hold to, or values or whatever, it's really more behaviors. It's actions that people take that you feel like are the things that embody what your company does. They help you with that. They suggest, here's a list of some fundamentals that you can consider. You can develop your own, of course, but here's also a few ideas that you can adapt or incorporate. I bet every time I look at other people that have them, I see many of us are pulling a few of those, core fundamentals because they're just good things that just make sense.
Right.
But then you're ritualizing them by trying to incorporate them into like your conversations. And so like we do the weekly email where I, take one of the core fundamentals, and then I, kind of write something to expound upon that idea of the fundamental, or maybe share its use or something like that. And then our store managers will incorporate that into their team meetings and have a discussion. So it can be, they'll carve out about 5 minutes, like, hey, let's talk about this week's fundamental. And what does this mean to you? Does someone have a story that they can relate of how they've had to implement this, or where they should have implemented this, or whatever it is? And by just getting that across, you really are sharing the things that you as a leader of your company think is most important, one of the building blocks, one of the foundations of your culture, with other people. And it helps to explain why and how you do the things in your company. And especially when you bring new people in, because over time, of course, we're always bringing new people in. It helps to kind of get them indoctrinated so that they're getting that exposure and that experience, So it's really not that difficult to do, right? I mean, the book itself is an easy read, and implementing it. I mean, they roll out an implementation procedure that you can follow. Did you, and then you can also even hire a specialist to come help you implement this as well. Did you guys sound like you guys self-implemented it.
Yeah.
Did you follow their procedure, or did you do it kind of differently? Especially being COVID.
I'm trying to remember what their procedure was at this point.
Their whole thing is about like, closing the store, having a, multi-hour meeting with each team that you're doing this with, and making a big production.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we did that when David and I split and went to the stores and talked in person, just to show the importance that we felt about it. Yeah, we're probably following a lot of that deal. I think we're probably doing a little of our own thing too,
Yeah.
But just trying to keep pushing it, keep talking about it, keep it in front. We're not force feeding them or anything like that. But I've really liked having the different perspectives, having more people get involved. I think that makes them buy in a little bit more too.
Yeah.
But it's Don, and some people aren't going to get it, and they're not going to, which is fine. I mean, it's not for everybody, and you're probably going to be somewhere else where you fit in better. But we just kind of look at it. If you're going to work for a company, you're going to spend that much time of your life working somewhere. Why not be proud of it? Why not be a place that has a good value system, that is trying their best to operate in a way that you're proud to work for? So to me, it's just a good, for great team members. It's a great system to have in place.
Yeah. I love it too, because like as you look at prospective hires or new hires and you show them your fundamentals, it gives them on, one or two sheets a synopsis of like, here's what working here looks like.
Right.
Here's the behaviors that we expect you to exhibit. And if you look at that and think like, oh, this looks gross,
right, then
this probably isn't a good fit for you,
exactly.
But if you can read this and go, oh, this is great, this is the kind of place I'd want to be, you're in the right place,
Absolutely.
And
right.
It's nice to be able to have all that so clearly articulated in one page. And to be clear, it takes some time, I think, to develop those fundamentals. It's not a quick and easy process, but
we
but it's worth it.
Them for a long time, but yeah, it's worth it. I recommend it.
We did our rollout a little bit different. We just decided to kind of do it a little more stealthily. So it was just kind of quietly brought in. There was an announcement of what we were doing and why. And then we just started kind of implementing it through the weekly email, through the store managers, incorporating it. And so rather than make a big production of it because of the timing and kind of what we were working on at the moment, we decided to do it stealthily, but that has worked out well as well. So I think the main thing is that we don't need perfection in doing it. We just need the efforts to do it. And we were at a spot where we felt like our culture was good, and that's probably the best time to start working on your cultures, when you already think you have a pretty good culture as it is. Like, because then it's not a hard lift. It's so much easier if you feel like, man, I think we're already doing pretty good, so let's just go ahead and push it over to great. Like, that's not that difficult. Maybe the next best time is when you realize that your culture is not at all what you'd hoped it to be.
Right.
But if you feel like, well, I think we're in pretty good shape, maybe do it now. You'll find it way easier to do it now.
Absolutely.
So we were kind of shifting back over to our conversation about locations, and you had just sort of briefly touched on like sort of the changing world of commerce, how that's changed quite a bit over the years, and frankly, even surprisingly, I think with COVID, it just even pushed it even more into e-commerce. Which honestly, I think I was surprised by because I already felt like, well, everyone already shops online and comfortable with that, but COVID just pushed that even more to get people to be comfortable with that.
Right.
So that integration of getting your products in your stores, on your websites, and then marketing those products, that's a difficult thing to pull off. And I was talking with my friend Leslie Sturm from Instrumental Music Center in Tucson, Arizona. I think maybe it was earlier this month, maybe it was last month. And they're trying to rework on their website. And she said, I've tried this a few times before, and it's been a while since I've done it. I just figured by now would have come through to like make this a much easier process. And she was shocked by how it's still basically the same process it was in the 90s, at least for the music products industry.
Right.
It's so difficult and so time consuming and so labor intensive and so challenging. You guys have a great site. Kind of walk me through how that has come about, and what kind of what it looks like to have a site like that. I'm sure it's been a significant investment, both in time, money, and resources. Kind of walk us through how that came to be.
Yeah, and I'm probably the least qualified to answer some of these questions, but David's son, my partner, cousin, his son Brad Tarpley he's fantastic at marketing. That's his game. And he's done a tremendous amount of work on building that website, especially the visual part of that. He's very talented in design, and so we're very fortunate to have that in house. I mean, that's a huge advantage to have someone with that kind of talent. We've struggled with the content, though. I mean, that's been a challenge. We actually have a team member now that has kind of come from a world where they did this kind of work before, and so they've gone full force on getting our content better. And so it takes someone that knows what they're doing, and they have to spend a lot of time on it. It's so hard because we don't sell a ton of stuff online. I mean, we do sell some. I almost feel like the marketing people know what we have in the store is almost as important as selling it online. Because so many, I do it. I go research a business I want to do business with, and I see and they don't show they have a guitar. I'm not going to go there for a guitar.
Right.
And so I'm sure we're getting the same. It's amazing to us. We've been in this town in Amarillo since '66, and I'll have people that I know go, "Oh, I didn't know you sold band instruments."
Right.
Yeah, we have for 50 years,
Right.
It's like, wow. And so, you take someone surfing the web, if they don't see what your store is offering, then they will assume you don't have it. So we've worked hard on that for that content. And it's a work in process right now. It really is. But it's improving quickly. We do use a Shopify platform, which has been a significant improvement. There are you got to have some software between softwares to talk to this one, to talk to that one. It's a little bit of a pain, but just the customer experience through Shopify is what they're used to. That's what they want to see. And
what were you using before?
The Vortex.
Yep.
And it was a bad customer experience, we thought, in our opinion.
Yeah.
And Shopify has just been superior. And there's just a lot of things and they continue to improve their platform. And so that's helping us kind of move things forward too. So they kind of come up with new things. And again, I'm not the expert on this, but I know they get excited for the guys that work on that about some new things that Shopify is coming up with that just help with communications. It does a great job of tracking items, and it just we've got it where it's talking to. We use AIM. It's talking to AIM well, sufficiently, and so that's figuring that out was a So, always working. It never ends with the website. It just
right.
never ends. But our biggest push right now is to get the content, get the images right, get the descriptions right, and even the little things, try to get it all look like it's professional all the way through. So.
And is that responsibility is falling down to a single person? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, there's several people. I mean, Brad has oversight. There's a single person that's really doing the content part of it right now, and he is very good and very efficient. So he's blowing through it like we couldn't ever go that fast.
Mm-hmm.
My son Mason also does some of it, and we have another employee named Chaz Branch that will do some of it too if necessary. But this other person's got it going so well that kind of letting him run with it,
Mm-hmm.
and so they can focus on other things. Obviously tying in we do a lot of our rental. If we're doing a rental night somewhere, we'll run it through the Shopify platform, which has been really it's worked pretty well. We've kind of got that down pretty good. And so again, it gives a good experience. You get back, everything's ready to pull in through ActiveE into the AIMC software. So
you have a connection basically set up from Shopify through a separate connection, so it's still pulling through ActiveE, so you can pull that into AIM.
You can, yes. Once we get back, we don't do it on site. It's just too hard to do that there. But once you get back to your whatever your store's at, it's all right there. It's waiting for you.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, we're currently in the Vortex situation, and we've been on that forever. And we when we redid the site several years ago, we were reaching out to developers, and we had one developer that we felt like gave us good advice. He was like, "Hey, I'd love to do your project." He's like, "But if you're telling me that you have a integrated solution with your point of sale software, you probably should use that." Yeah. And so we went and found a developer that was familiar with not only Vortex and ASP.NET, but also was familiar with AIM and actually knew AIM, which was unbelievable.
Great. Yeah.
And so we brought them in, and they've been good to work with, but it's been really expensive.
Yeah.
And you still have these just tremendous holdbacks because we're still going through Vortex, and there's just some mind-numbingly frustrating issues of dealing with Vortex. And I often wonder if we made a mistake going that route. I thought there'd be deeper integration, that there'd be better upgrades, but it just really hasn't been that way. So I'm sure now that we finally got our site to a point that we feel like it's pretty functional, and probably the next big expense is moving it over to to Spotify or something like that, or Spotify, to Shopify or something like that, And so it is kind of never ending, but it's necessary. I remember back in, I think it was 2008, 2009, which was actually the first time that I spoke with you because we had reached out because we had heard that Guitar Center was coming to Springfield, and so I kind of reached through the industry grapevine, and a few folks said, "Well, the folks at Tarpley Music have just dealt with this. You should talk with them." And so I reached out, and I think it was you and I that spoke, but it was so long ago I can't quite remember. But anyway, I remember that we had a customer who I think was roughly high school age send us an email and just put us on blast about how terrible our website was, and it was nowhere near as good as Guitar Center's website. And at that point, we're an independent retailer. We had our store in Joplin, and he's comparing us to the nationwide, the leader, and that should be the benchmark of where we're supposed to be. And I remember thinking at the moment, this kid is completely irrational. This is an unrealistic expectation. However, it's going to be a very realistic expectation in the next 10 years.
Right.
And I think we're definitely there. We're at that point where people expect that you're going to have a functional website, that they can go to your website, see what products you have for sale, they can purchase from it. And they essentially want kind of a seamless integrated process. That's their expectation today. So
I agree. Yeah.
It falls on us to deliver that to them. So in your situation with e-commerce and everything else that's involved with that, are they having an omni-channel experience where they could see things online and go to their stores and see what's in the stores? Or do you have a warehouse where a lot of maybe the more higher end products are kept in a warehouse and not kept in the stores?
Most everything, but they can see what locations things are at, so they can see where if it's in the Waco store, then they can see that it's there. So
yeah, there's a cost and expense in trying to give that functionality.
Well, it talks to AIMC. I mean, it's talking. So hopefully communication is working well.
Right. Yeah.
But we don't, and again, that's where we, especially as retailers in the world these days, we try to have all that high end inventory out on the floor for people to buy. And so our stores are, they'll ship from each location that understands how to ship a product. And if we get a crazy order from somewhere else in the United States, and that they can handle that, and so they got to keep their boxes. We got to keep, the packing materials and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of where we're at. Maybe one of these days we'll have a more centralized operation of that. But where we're at in our lifespan with that is, each store can handle that operation if they need to.
Gotcha. So, you guys have done a really great job on the marketing side of things too, especially with some of your video marketing and Facebook marketing. It's really, really well done, very entertaining and well executed. I was just watching through some of the videos today before we were connecting, and I was like, gosh, this is a high level. Like, this is done very, very well. This isn't just a camera thrown on a tripod out on the showroom floor before the store opens doing a demo. Like, this is, you guys got a set built and doing a nice job with it. Can you kind of tell me how that came to be? And
that was kind of, again, a Brad push. The YouTube, we had a personality in our store, and it's in Burleson, Texas, which is kind of South Fort Worth. He kind of came to us too, and it's like, hey man, he had owned his own music store, and he came to work for us, and just a great person, just a wonderful person, great personality, and knows product extremely well. And so we just kind of said, well, YouTube is huge. It's an opportunity for us. We did spend quite a bit of money on equipment. That I'm the guy that takes care of finances, and I'm kind of like, what? But what? That's how much the camera is going to cost. But it is a very professional setup. Got a studio built in our store in Burleson, and it's crazy. We started just throwing stuff out there, and now we've got manufacturers sending us product early so that we'll highlight it on the video. We've got we're almost to 5,000 subscribers. Over 1 million hours of view time. It's just unbelievable. It's really grown. I mean, that's just in the last 2 years. And it's gone from that 0 to that in 2 years. And hopefully it'll continue to escalate. You can't really, it's hard to get an ROI on that. You don't know. You do know when someone walks in and goes, oh, I saw that guitar on your video. I want that, and that does happen. But it's hard to know how many just walk in and never say anything, or just come in because I don't know. But it's all good to us. I mean, it's well done. It's professional. I think it represents us really well. We do want to build an education channel. That's kind of our next thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's definitely combo heavy right now. But he's actually a percussion guy who's in school percussion. I mean, so he has the talents to go other avenues too. So that's kind of our next step into that. But they crank them out, man. They're doing filming a couple a week almost,
Yeah.
And then on social media too, we have one of our managers has kind of taken on that on his accord and we have someone at each location that I don't know how often they meet, maybe once every 2 weeks, but they try to share ideas. They try, they have, we got to post so many, X number of posts every week. And, here's something we did here, here's something to do there, so we want the local store to post because every store is unique, as you know. Mm-hmm. They all have their own feel and difference. Even though we're all the same, there's those differences in each location. And so we want to see that personality. And so that team tries to help each other out, tries to keep it, consistent, with what things that's going on in the company. And we try not to push sales too hard on the Facebook and the social media thing. We throw stuff in there, but it's more just relationship, hey, we're here.
Yeah. That seems to be the key for that kind of stuff. And you were talking about the ROI. It's kind of funny. We had an interview with someone earlier this week that he has a marketing background, and we were looking for another position, but his application just kind of piqued my interest. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, are you available that we could just talk? I don't really have a position for you. I think the thing you applied for probably isn't the right fit, if I'm being honest. But I am curious about your marketing background. I would like to talk to you more about it. And so he came in and we had a really interesting conversation, and kind of this, what we came up with, the conclusion we came up with is that sometimes it's hard to pinpoint the ROI for these things. But there was a senator that said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. Exactly. I think it's like, I can't quite explain how I know when the marketing's working, but I know it when I see it. Like I know when the marketing's working, I know it. And when it's not, I know it. And I may not be able to clearly articulate it or point to a specific number and say, like, we did this video and this happened, so therefore it works.
Right.
But I can generally you can just feel it when, like, I'm doing this and there's this kind of buzz, energy, response, whatever that's happening with it. Or you can also feel the corollary, which is I'm putting in this content and making this effort and I'm hearing crickets afterwards or whatever. Like,
Right.
And so I've been on both sides of that, and I think I'm
Yeah.
currently on both sides of that. We have some of our marketing endeavors that we could see this is working and generating, and then other stuff it's like you might as well just like taken all that time and thrown it in the trash can. Like that was pointless. No one cared at all about that. And so trying to figure out those pieces and how to best speak to your audience is really the trick. It's been a challenge for us. I feel like marketing wise, we have a few things we've done well. A couple of niche YouTube channels we've done well, and we do really great on the word of mouth. But boy, on everything else, I think it's just been a struggle for us. And so when I watch and look at things like the stuff that you do, the stuff that the guys over at the acoustic shop do here in Springfield, and many other retailers that just do such a great job with it, I can't help but be envious and think, oh, I wish we had that same thing. But I haven't honestly made the investment to do it. I haven't taken the personnel. I certainly haven't built a studio for it. So
Yeah, well, it was an investment.
Yeah.
But I think it was wise. So yeah, it's funny how it's changed so much. Again, I'm aging myself, but gosh, back in the days, 3% of your retail is to be spent on advertising. That's kind of a rule of thumb way back in the day, and we don't spend anywhere near that much. And I think it's way more effective now than it ever was when we were doing radio and TV and spend all those dollars on that kind of, and so,
$2,000 a month for a phone book ad. Yeah. I remember all that stuff. Yeah,
Absolutely.
You're exactly right. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and we again touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to come back to it, is it's a challenge to keep a family business going and to keep it in the family. And you had mentioned, about there's discussion about failures of businesses once they enter the third generation. And I think it's a very difficult thing to keep generational businesses not only going and alive, but thriving. Certainly the way that Tarpley is thriving. I know the folks at Amaro are very intentional about how they handle that transition. What are the plans for Tarpley? How do you guys handle that transition as you bring in family?
Yeah, it's, I'll go back a couple of steps. When the third generation got involved, the prior generation had a situation where one family member was in the business and one wasn't. But when someone passed, it still got split evenly. And it was, they saw the damage that can do when that person that's not involved in the company gets half the business. And so this is again where these two brothers really solidified our company and how it operates moving forward. They're like, we can't have that happen. That cannot happen again. And so, we're not as, Amaro's, if anyone knows, it's very specific and we're not quite that good, but we are specific, but not as specific as they are. Couple of things with our family is that there's no ownership that passes unless you're absolutely in the business, working full-time, full board. Everyone, all the kids that have been in each generation had that opportunity if they wished to pursue it. That avenue was there for them. But if they weren't going to be in it, they had no rights to the stock of this company. And so there had to be a commitment to be into the business. So like in my generation, there's two of us, and there would have been another four that had the opportunity that did not do that. And so we had a very structured buy-sell agreement funded by life insurance. And we set that up. And so, it's very clear. It's stated. It's a well-written document that everyone understands. Spouses have to sign it. It's very detailed. And so unfortunately, when someone passes and that has to go into effect, it's very clear. Everyone understands what's going to happen. And so my dad and uncle have passed. And so that happened into my generation and my cousin and I, and he has two boys that are involved in the business. I have one, and I may have more later on in life, but we have, written a current buy-sell for that same exact situation. And so that's very important, that's very clear for all those that are involved or not involved of how that's going to transition. But it's, for me, for my guys, I want them to go work somewhere else for a while before they come to the company. We've never pressured at all. We don't do it. We had not pressured. I was not pressured at all. I mean, I wasn't going to do this until my senior year in college, but so we try to be careful. We want to be sure that they don't feel this obligation to make this thing stay. I can still remember my dad talking to me about, he always apologized to me because he said, you could have made so much more money. I had an accounting degree. I was like, yeah, but I chose to do this and I'm happy. That's my decision. I'm glad I did, but there is a lot of stress. You have, there's a lot of responsibility that you feel and you better be ready for that. And so I like the idea of going off somewhere else, experiencing life a little bit, seeing what's out there. And I think if you do want to come back and be part of this, then your value for it will be because you mean it,
Yeah.
So that's my rule. Now, David doesn't do it that way, but his two are already here. They're already well involved into it, and they've been in it. So we've got our fifth generation fully involved in the company right now. I mean, they're a good 10 years into it. So they all have a little bit of stock, and so they have a little bit of ownership, and we have a funding mechanism for down the road when something were to happen. So we've just never taken it for granted. You never take it lightly. No one's going to work harder than we do. We just, and so that's the way we've approached it. It's not quite as sophisticated as Amro, but anyone that has multiple generations, a buy sell is just a necessity. It just has to be there.
Did you bring in an outside expert to help you develop that plan? I mean, obviously you have an attorney that would help you write it, but did you specifically seek someone that had some experience with these things to help you structure it?
And my dad and uncle would have done that at that time. But yes, they did. And it was an attorney that did, that's what they did, and so they set up the, a whole 9 yards. There's probably some cost to it. I mean, there is some cost to it, but it's not crazy. I mean, it's a pretty normal process. The biggest cost is the insurance. You got to fund the insurance plan, to make it work. But really, relatively speaking, that's not crazy either, But just that just the clarity of it, I think, is probably the most important thing, and especially for those that aren't in it.
Yeah, for other family to know what to expect, how this is going to happen. Yeah, without a doubt, that's critical, because it's not an if, it's a when. I mean, it's at some point we're exiting this business and exiting this life, so got to have a plan for that, without a doubt.
Right. Absolutely. Okay.
Well, this has been a really great conversation, John. Thanks so much again for taking the time. For anyone wondering, it's July 30th as we're recording this, so we're gearing up for all back to school. And John was great to just set aside this hour to sit and kind of talk and share the story of Tarpley. A really fascinating, interesting story, and I love the longevity of it, and the fact that even as it goes through the next generations, it's in great hands and continuing to grow and build and be challenged and finding successes and stresses and rewards and all those things. Such a wonderful thing. So thank you so much for taking the time to share it today. And we appreciate you being so candid and honest about everything through.
Hey, thank you, Dominic. Appreciate being on.
Absolutely.